All right, so a couple things to show you guys. First one being, how do we load content into a page without directing people away from that page? So in other words, we build out our web page. Our example in this case is you've got a menu where you want to load each individual menu item for either sushi or soups or salads right into the page. Just have it drop in without having to go through and direct people to completely different content. So what we do is we use what's called an iframe to do that. And what we're going to do, you can see here, is
there a way to zoom in?
Yep, let me try and remember how to do that. Somehow. There we go. So what we've got in terms of our text markup, so this is just a regular old web page. It's pretty stripped down. It's just a skeleton. So here's our body tags. So this is our content for that. So what I've got is, these are our links. If you look up here, we've got our text 1, text 2 links, which you see right here.
Can that go in right under our nav?
Yep, so it can be your nav. So the only thing you're going to do is you're going to change that so that way they've got a target. In this case, so here's my normal link setup up until...
So it can go right in my ID nav?
Yeah. Except in your case where you've got just your menu page with the different list items, like salads, soups, whatever, those are the ones that are going to get this. So those links are going to get a target, and it's going to have the name of our iframe in that target. So our setup for the iframe, and you guys can pull this from online just about anywhere. It's got a width, it's got a height, you can set that. It has a source. Whatever you want to load first in terms of a source, that's what you'll drop in on the iframe. So what happens is we're telling these links, okay, our href, our hyperlink reference, it's pointing to a blank document that has, the only thing that's in it is my text right here that you see. This could actually be pulled out and stripped down to nothing but this here. So simply the text that I want to show up on my page. It doesn't need the normal header content that we'd see from a web page. It's simply just a HTML document with my text in there. All of my CSS and styling can stay in my normal CSS document. You might have to link those two together to get it to show up and sort of figure out what things are going to look like temporarily. But, excuse me, this is essentially all I need for this. So we've got two separate documents. One is called text1, one is called text2. They're both .html. And then if I go and I preview this in Google Chrome, the source that's in there already is the W3 Schools HTML page, so that loads by default when this page loads up. If I were to set that to text1.html under the source code, that's what would load first. So depending on what you're looking to load up first, when someone visits, that's what you'll drop into the iframe. So we've got our links, we've got our iframe, which has been named, and when I come here and I test this out, what it does is it grabs that content from text1.html and shows it. Same for text2. You can see here it's swapping back and forth when I choose one or the other. So if you had your web page with your header set up, your footer, all your other graphics.
So where it says text 1, that's why we're putting like soup?
Yep, so you'd have soup.html and you'd have all of your text for your soup menu in there.
And just having it on.
Yep.
So why are you doing this instead of, like, what's the purpose of this little box?
The purpose of using an iframe like this would be, it would cut down on the overall file size of your website. So say, if you've got a menu list where your soup menu is, however, many lines of text tall, and then you've got your salad menu, which might be only like 4 lines. Rather than creating a whole new HTML document that links to your header graphics, your background graphics, all of that, you can use this to just call for a simple text document. The text document is still a .html, but it'll allow you to go and pull new content. You can also pull, like you saw, I can display an external website in this. So if you had something like a gallery from Lightroom, I don't know if you guys have ever generated a gallery through Lightroom to create like a picture gallery of any kind, you could call that Lightroom gallery and load it in an iframe inside of your web page. It's basically a way for you to include outside content in this template or this framework that you've already built. So like for the Only on a Bagel company website, if they were having like some sort of, say there was a bagel festival in Binghamton, they could load up that flyer in an iframe inside of their existing website page. So they could load up content from someplace else and just have it display. Websites can deny other websites the rights to display their content inside of their web page. So W3 Schools does not do that, so theirs will show up. It could be you run into an instance where if you wanted to display, say Apple's website inside of an iframe on your web page, Apple probably blocks that, so that won't work. But it's just a way of including external content. So you could load PDFs into your website using the same deal. You could load JPEGs, you could load, what else? You could load like Flash animations, video, that kind of stuff. So if you had like 3 videos that were all set up, you could set up links to point video 1, 2, and 3 and set the target as your iframe. And as they click it, video 1 loads, they can watch it, video 2 loads up. It's basically a way of keeping things consistent in terms of like you don't want to create a million other web pages and have something like a video where it's just a file on its own. You don't need to create a new HTML page to load it in here. You can just load it through an iframe. So it saves you the trouble of creating more web pages for content that really doesn't need it. Okay, any questions on that before we move to the next thing?
Can you just zoom in on the second, that one? Just so I can knock that down.
Yeah. And you can get like, if you run a Google search for a, load content in an iframe, it'll give you that online. So for our next thing, let's see, what we're gonna do next. Cassidy, you had a question about oh, the little icons, the fav icon. Okay. So some of you guys probably notice that on certain websites, let's see, like this one here. This is a forum that I just went too quick to confirm what I had in my head for the iframe. You'll see there's these tiny little images up in the tab. There's one here for Google. This is my website. I haven't set a fav icon for it yet. So what these are is these are tiny little graphics. I forget how big they are. I think they're, okay, so they're 16 by 16 pixels. And the file is called favicon.ico. So what we do to set these is you create your graphic. I usually use a generator online. So if you look for, in this case, favicon-generator.org, you produce your graphics, choose file. Let's see if I've got something on here. Downloads.
But it has to be the 16 by 16.
Yep, yeah, it'll be a 16 by 16. Usually what it'll do is it'll let you scale it down. So I'll just use this. So I'm gonna upload this. This is, you know, it's like a 200 by 200 image. So I'm gonna hit choose on that. I'm gonna select generate only 16 by 16 favicon. You can tell it like if it's not perfectly 16 by 16 or 100 by 100, tell it to maintain its dimensions. Don't squish it or resize it. So I'm going to hit generate. They say thanks for using my tool, whatever, blah blah blah. So then it gives me here download the generated favicon. So I'm going to download it. Let's see here, where did it go? So there it is right there. I'm going to take that and I'm going to put it in my Cart 206 folder or my folder for my website. It's included right in there. And then all you do to hook that up is you drop these links into your header. So right where your CSS would go in the head of your HTML documents, you drop that in. I'm going to hit save. I'm going to make sure it points to it. In this case, I just need it to point to the favicon because it's in the same exact location. Come back to my browser. Going to refresh, and then you see up there at the top, it's loaded with that little favicon. So you do have to drastically simplify it. In your case, if you're doing this for the bagel company, you can just do like a little bagel, something like that. So the simpler the image, because it's so small, it's 16 by 16, you've got just a 16 by 16 pixel grid to work with. So it's got to be very, very simple in its makeup. Something like this D logo that they use here, this goes pretty much right to the edge on just about all sides of that 16 by 16 content square. So you do have to drastically simplify the image down. If it's a logo or something, you might have to go with a word mark instead, or something like the Oneonta Bagel Company. Their logo would display well. So something just to signify that, like a little bagel. And this same process is used if you guys have ever bookmarked a website on like an iPad or an iPhone or an Android device. It'll give you like a little icon for that. This same method, setting up the link, you can see here, shortcut icon. Someone bookmarks this, it's going to use that little favicon as the icon of the bookmark. Same for iDevices, tablets, smartphones. You just set a higher resolution image and point to it using the same deal. So the shortcut icon would actually point to like a 100 by 100 PNG file of some kind.
One more question.
Yeah.
Those little like Facebook things.
Yep, the on
what are
hover.
those- Yeah, what are those called to like look up, like to find that image? And do I create it? I don't create it myself, right? Because it's a certain font.
Creating one for like Facebook and one for
Yeah, but like this,
Instagram.
they must already have them because this is like this. It's like a different font. Like to find these things, like what are they called? Like to type in.
Oh, it's just social media icons.
Okay.
There's actually a lot of good places to find those. If you go to, let's see, Icon Finder is a good place to go. Yep, iconfinder.com, and then if you search for Facebook, some do cost money, but if you switch the price over to free, you can download, scalable vector graphics, PNGs. You can get the Illustrator file, so you could get the Illustrator file, save one as the blue as a PNG, change the color and save that for your rollover. Say when you roll over it turns green or something like that. So this is a good place to come for all of that stuff. And there's a few others out there too. So this is a good place to come to get those. And then in terms of setting that up so that way it does change on a hover, my website has that right now. Let's see here. So it does it in a couple different ways on my website. These ones here, the background is originally set to this little bit of a darker gray, and then on hover, it displays a JPEG image in the background. Same for my social media stuff here. It has one image set, and then it switches to the other one. So the way this works is, for instance, these circles here, and this is going to be the same is going to be true of what's happening there on that website. So I've got a div, and inside of that div, basically, I set up the divs just so I could get the three in a row on here. You could just place them all side by side in one single div if you wanted to. But because of the way my site is set up, these are set to scale and then switch over at different points. So what I've got is a link, and that link has an ID and a class. You could do this with just a single ID, but what I'm doing is I'm setting up the class. The ID sphere is what's making them round, and then switching them out to be rectangular when it gets smaller. But what's making the graphics switch is these classes here that I have set up. So I have the class art, BTN short for button. So I've got one for art, one for design, one for teach. And in my style sheet, so by default, art button has this background color. Oops, this is my other side. I need this one. Okay, so by default, background color for those buttons is this darker gray. And then I've got the class art button colon hover. So on a hover, the background image displays this. And it's cropped to be round using border radius on this overriding class that styles the buttons as a whole. So what you'd end up having is, in the instance of the social media icons, you'll set a class on each of those. So you'll have one that'll be called, Facebook, and you'll set the default state for the background image. And you'll set the background size so that way it makes that container the exact size it needs to. You might have to set width and height. So if it's a 50 by 50 pixel image, you might have to add width and height 50 and 50 on here. And then on the flip side, you've got art button colon hover. So the default state, and then when it's hovered over, what that image changes to. So it's similar to what you did with your navigation, where you set it up when you hover over
Are we
it.
still recording?
It gives an underline. Yeah.
Okay, good.
So you just have these two different states. So art button could have, say background color. It's going to be white by default. So I've got my link that's been assigned the class art button. By default, here's the styling for it right here. And then when I hover over, so art button : hover, here's what I want it to look like using a background image. And it'll switch to that for me.
Okay.
So it's just a matter of for each one, setting up one for Facebook, for Behance, for Instagram. You set up your two different graphics, what it looks like by default, what it looks like when it's hovered over, and then you just drop them in, set it up through CSS.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions on that? Anybody need me to repeat anything? All right, I'm going to stop the recording.